Have you ever wondered what happens when two people decide to build their life together, but leave God out of the equation? When they say yes to each other, but no to the one who created marriage itself? When they chase happiness, but forget where it comes from? Throughout the 1900s, something changed in how people thought about marriage. The white dress, the flowers, the party. All of it stayed the same, but the foundation started to crack. Couples began treating marriage like a contract between two people, not a covenant with God standing in the middle. Civil ceremonies replaced church weddings. Promises made before a judge replaced vows made before the altar. And slowly, quietly, the idea took root that you could start a new life, a new family, a new future, without ever asking God to be part of it. In the middle of this shift stood a priest in Italy who saw things most people never see. His name was Giovanni Melchior Bosco, born August 16, 1815, in a tiny hamlet called Becci in the Piedmont region. His father died when he was 2. His mother Margherita raised him in poverty so deep they ate coarse bread and worked the fields before sunrise. But she taught him something money could not buy. She taught him to see God in everything, in the rain that fed the vines, in the harvest, in the faces of the poor who knocked on their door in winter asking for soup. When John was 9 years old, he had a dream that would shape the rest of his life. He saw himself in a yard filled with boys, poor boys, angry boys, boys cursing and blaspheming. He tried to stop them with his fists. Then a figure appeared, a man in white whose face shone so bright John could barely look at him. The man told him he would spend his life with these boys. Not with blows, the man said, but with gentleness and charity. A woman appeared next to the man, majestic, beautiful. She told John to make himself humble, strong, and robust. She said at the right time he would understand everything. That woman was Mary. That man was Christ. That dream never left him. If you value documented Catholic history and the visions of the saints like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the biographical memoirs of Saint John Bosco, compiled by the Salesians between 1898 and 1939, a 40-volume collection that includes Don Bosco's own written accounts, ordered by Pope Pius IX in 1858, and Dreams, Visions, and Prophecies of Don Bosco, edited by Eugene Brown and published by Salesiana Publishers in 1986, drawn directly from those memoirs. These are not secondhand stories. These are the saint's own words, preserved, documented, and verified by the Church. Now back to the information. John Bosco became a priest June 5th, 1841. He was 25. He went straight to the streets of Turin, and the city had 117,000 people. The Industrial Revolution had just hit. Factories needed workers. Families left the countryside and moved to the slums. Boys as young as 12 worked 16-hour days. Many had no parents, no home, no hope. They slept in alleys. They stole to eat. By the time they were teenagers, most were in prison. Don Bosco could not stand it. He started gathering them on Sundays, first in a church, then in a meadow, then in a field. He taught them catechism. He let them play. He fed them. People thought he was insane. Priests who promised to help got frustrated and left. 2 friends even tried to have him committed to a mental institution. They brought a carriage and planned to trick him into getting in. But Don Bosco smiled and said, "After you." He held the door open. When they climbed in, he slammed it shut and told the driver to go as fast as possible. The friends ended up at the asylum instead. By December 8th, 1841, the feast of the Immaculate Conception, he had his first real oratory, a boy named Bartholomew Gorelli. Don Bosco met him while vesting for Mass. The sacristan asked the boy to serve. The boy said he did not know how. Don Bosco took him aside. He taught him. He asked his name. He asked where he lived. The boy had no home. Don Bosco told him to come back next Sunday. He did, and he brought friends. Within months, Don Bosco had dozens of boys. Within years, hundreds. He did not just teach them prayers. He taught them trades, tailoring, blacksmithing, carpentry. He found them work. He signed contracts on their behalf. Some employers tried to turn the boys into servants and scullery boys. Don Bosco made sure they learned actual skills. He protected them. He loved them. He called them his rascals. But Don Bosco saw something else, something darker. He had dreams all his life. Not ordinary dreams, visions. Pope Pius IX met with him in 1858 and ordered him to write them all down, word for word. The Pope knew these were not just dreams. They were messages from God, warnings, prophecies. On the night of April 17, 1868, Don Bosco had one of his most terrifying visions. He went to bed exhausted. As soon as he fell asleep, a voice said, "Get up and follow me." It was the same figure from his childhood dream, the man with the shining face. Don Bosco called him the man with the cap. The guide took him down a wide, beautiful road. Smooth stones, green hedges covered with roses. It looked perfect, but the road sloped downward. Don Bosco saw boys from his oratory running down the path. He recognized every face. They were sprinting, arms flailing, hair standing on end, eyes wild with terror. They could not stop. Something was pulling them. Don Bosco looked closer and saw lassos on the ground. Invisible ropes. Each one had a name. The lasso of pride, the lasso of disobedience, the lasso of impurity, the lasso of envy, the lasso of theft, the lasso of gluttony, the lasso of anger, the lasso of laziness. The boys tripped over the lassos and fell. The ropes tightened around them. They were dragged down the slope toward a massive opening. A furnace. The mouth of hell. Don Bosco screamed. He tried to grab them. The guide stopped him. "Leave them alone," he said. "When these boys come dashing into this cave," the guide explained, "they know where they are going. They have been warned 1,000 times. But they still choose to rush into the fire because they do not detest sin and are loath to forsake it. Divine justice harries them, hounds them, goads them on, so they cannot halt until they reach this place." Don Bosco watched in horror as boy after boy crashed through the gates. Each one had his sin written on his forehead. The gates swung open with a deafening roar. 1,000 inner portals opened at once. The boys disappeared into the flames. The guide lifted a curtain. Behind it was a group of boys Don Bosco knew well, boys who attended his oratory, boys who seemed good, boys whose souls were in danger because of one specific sin. The guide pointed to an inscription above the entrance, the 6th commandment. "Transgressions of this commandment," the guide said, "cause the eternal ruin of many boys." Don Bosco asked if he could write down their names so he could warn them individually. The guide said no. "A generic warning will suffice," he said. "Even if you did admonish them individually, they would promise, but not always in earnest. For a firm resolution, one needs God's grace, which will not be denied to your boys if they ask. On your part, pray and make sacrifices. As for the boys, let them listen to your admonitions and consult their conscience. It will tell them what to do." Then the guide showed him another group. These boys were there because of disobedience. Not the big, dramatic kind. The small kind. The boys who left the dormitory at night when they were supposed to be sleeping. The boys who wandered the courtyard looking for trouble. The boys who climbed scaffolds and endangered their lives. The boys who went to church but daydreamed instead of praying. The boys who slept during services. The boys who read secular books instead of singing hymns to the Blessed Virgin. The guide explained something that shook Don Bosco to his core. "Disobedience," he said, "is the root of all evil. Not pride. Disobedience. It was disobedience that led Adam and Eve to commit the first sin. It was disobedience that drove them from paradise. And it is disobedience that drives souls to hell every single day." Don Bosco asked what he should tell his boys. The guide said, "Tell them that obedience to God, the church, their parents, and their superiors, even in small things, will save them. Tell them to avoid idleness, which was the origin of the sin of holy King David. Tell them to keep themselves busy at all times, so that the devil will not have time to tempt them." But then the guide showed Don Bosco something even worse. He lifted another veil. Behind it was an inscription in Latin, "Radix omnium malorum," the root of all evils. And behind that veil were more boys from the oratory. Boys who had stolen, boys who had lied, boys who had broken into the pantry or rummaged through their companions' trunks to steal food or money, boys who had stolen clothes and sent them home to their families, boys who had damaged property and never repaired it, boys who had borrowed things and never returned them. The guide told Don Bosco to admonish them, tell them to curb all vain, harmful desires, tell them to obey God's law, tell them to be zealous of their own honor. Otherwise jealousy shall lead them to greater excesses that shall plunge them into sorrow, death, and damnation. Don Bosco was devastated. These were his boys, boys he loved. Boys he had fed and clothed and taught. Boys who sat in his classrooms and played in his courtyards. And yet here they were, inches away from eternal fire. The guide took him deeper. They entered a cavern. Above the entrance was another inscription in Latin. "Dabit Dominus omnipotens ignem et vermis in carnis eorum ut urantur et sentiant usque in sempiternum." The Lord Almighty will give fire and worms into their flesh so that they may burn and may feel forever. The words came from the book of Judith, chapter 16, verse 21. Inside, Don Bosco saw the faces of boys who had been formed in his schools, boys he had taught, boys he had fed, boys he had protected. And the torture they felt was not just physical, it was spiritual. It was the memory of every single thing they had thrown away. They remembered each unforgiven sin, every lie they told and never confessed, every impure thought they entertained and never repented, every act of disobedience they laughed about and never corrected. And they remembered the exact punishment each sin deserved, not because God was cruel, but because they had been warned, they had been told, they had known the truth and chosen to ignore it. They remembered the thousands of means they had to convert to the Lord. The confessors, who were always available, the daily mass they could have attended, the rosary they could have prayed, the spiritual direction they could have sought, the retreats they could have gone on, the books they could have read, the companions who tried to help them and were pushed away. Many of these means were extraordinary. Don Bosco himself was extraordinary. A priest who could read souls, a mystic who had visions, a man who performed miracles, a father who loved them more than their own parents did. They had direct access to a saint, and they wasted it. They remembered so many graces given by the Blessed Virgin. Don Bosco had taught them to pray to Mary, Help of Christians. He had told them she was their mother. He had explained that she wanted to save them. He had shown them how one Hail Mary, prayed with sincerity, could pull a soul out of purgatory. They had been given chance after chance to turn to her, and they had ignored everyone. They remembered the promises they made to her and never kept. The promises to avoid sin, the promises to pray the rosary, the promises to guard their purity, the promises to be obedient. They had made these promises during missions, during confessions, during moments of fear when they thought they might die. And as soon as the fear passed, they forgot. They remembered that they could have been saved by such a small effort. One good confession, one sincere act of contrition, one genuine resolution to change. That was all it would have taken. They were so close. The door was right there. The key was in their hand. And they chose not to turn it. What torture to think that they could have been saved so easily, Don Bosco wrote later. Yet now they are irredeemably lost. Hell is indeed paved with good intentions. The boys in that cavern had intended to go to confession later. They had intended to stop sinning eventually. They had intended to take their faith seriously someday. But later never came. Eventually never arrived. Someday never happened. And now they had forever to regret it. Don Bosco asked his guide a question that haunted him. He asked if any of these boys had been to confession recently. The guide said yes, many of them. But they had lied. They had hidden sins. They had confessed impurity 2 or 3 times when it was really 4 or 5. They had left out details because they were embarrassed. They had made excuses for themselves. They had told the priest what they thought he wanted to hear instead of the truth. And so their confessions were invalid. Their absolution meant nothing. They walked out of the confessional, still carrying the weight of their sins, still trapped by the lassos, still sliding down the slope. And they thought they were fine. They thought they were safe. They thought they had done what they needed to do. But God cannot be fooled. A bad confession is worse than no confession. A lie told in the confessional is a sacrilege, and sacrilege carries its own punishment. The guide showed Don Bosco another group. These were boys who had died suddenly, boys who had climbed on scaffolding and fallen, boys who had gotten sick and died within days, boys who had been in accidents. They had no time to prepare, no time to confess, no time to repent. They died in the state they were living in, and if they were living in sin, they died in sin. Don Bosco had always warned his boys about this. He told them that nobody knows the day or the hour. He told them that death can come at any moment. He told them to live as if every day might be their last. He told them to keep their souls clean. He told them to never go to sleep with a mortal sin on their conscience. Some listened, most did not. They were young. They felt invincible. They thought they had time. They were wrong. Then the guide did something that left a mark Don Bosco would carry for the rest of his life. He told Don Bosco to touch the outer wall of the cavern. Just one touch. Don Bosco hesitated. The guide insisted. Don Bosco reached out his hand and placed his palm against the stone. The pain was beyond description. It was fire. It was agony. It was every nerve in his body screaming at once. Don Bosco woke up in his bed, gasping for air, clutching his hand. It was swollen. The skin had peeled off. The burn was real. It stayed for days. On Sunday, May 3rd, 1868, the feast of St. Joseph's patronage, Don Bosco told his boys everything. He stood in front of them and recounted the entire vision. He did not soften it. He did not edit it. He told them exactly what he had seen. He showed them his hand. The boys were terrified. Some wept. Some promised to change. Some confessed sins they had been hiding for years. Don Bosco spent hours in the confessional that day and the days that followed. He saved many of them. Not all, but many. Years later, one of the boys who had been there that night wrote about it. His name was John Bosco. He swore under oath that Don Bosco told them many other dreams concerning the deaths of boys at the oratory. We believed them to be true prophecies, he said. We still do, because unfailingly they came true. During the 7 years I lived at the oratory, not a boy died without Don Bosco predicting his death. We were also convinced that whoever died there under his care and assistance surely went to heaven. Don Bosco did not just see the boys who were in danger. He saw the ones who were saved. He saw the power of confession. He saw the power of the Blessed Sacrament. He saw the power of devotion to Mary. He told his boys over and over again that there are 2 things the devil is deadly afraid of: fervent communions and frequent visits to the Blessed Sacrament. He founded the Salesian congregation in 1859. 15 seminarians and 1 high school boy. He named it after St. Francis de Sales, the master of gentleness and charity. By the time Don Bosco died on January 31st, 1888, there were 250 homes for boys founded by the Salesian Society. They contained 130,000 children. Over 6,000 of them became priests. The Salesian Society still exists today. It is the second largest religious order in the world. But Don Bosco's vision was not just about boys in an oratory in Turin. It was about everyone. It was about the path that leads to hell. And it starts with one simple decision, the decision to live without God. You do not need to curse. You do not need to steal. You do not need to commit some horrible, dramatic sin. All you need to do is say, I will build my life my way. I will make my choices. I will follow my path. I do not need God in the middle of it. This is what happens when couples start a new life without God. They do not see the lassos on the ground. They do not see the slope. They walk down the beautiful road with the roses and the smooth stones, and they think everything is fine. They promise to love each other. They promise to be faithful. They promise to stay together. But they never promise to obey God. They never promise to honor the sacrament. They never invite Christ to stand at the altar with them. And slowly, the road gets steeper. The arguments get worse. The resentment builds. The joy fades. They wonder why it is so hard. They wonder why they feel so empty. They wonder why the love they felt on their wedding day seems to have disappeared. It is because they are standing on a foundation that was never blessed. They are building a house on sand. And when the storms come, and the storms always come, the house will fall. Don Bosco saw this. He saw it in the boys who came from homes where God was not welcome. He saw it in the boys whose parents had civil marriages but never stepped foot in a church. He saw it in the boys who learned from their fathers that religion was for women and children, not for real men. He saw it in the boys who were taught that you could live a good life without ever bending your knee to anyone, including God. And he saw where those boys ended up, running down the slope, unable to stop, crashing through the gates of hell. The church has always taught that marriage is a sacrament, not a contract, not a party, not a piece of paper signed at City Hall, a sacrament, a holy union, a covenant between a man, a woman, and God. When a couple exchanges vows in front of a priest, they are not just making promises to each other, they are making promises to God. They are inviting him to be the foundation of their life together. They are asking him to bless their union. They are asking him to give them the grace to keep their promises, even when it is hard. Without that grace, marriage is just two people trying to love each other with their own strength. And human strength runs out. Human patience runs out. Human love runs out. But God's love never runs out. God's grace never runs out. And when you build your marriage on God's love instead of your own, you have access to something that will carry you through every storm, every argument, every disappointment, every trial. Don Bosco understood this better than most. He spent his life watching what happened when people tried to live without God. He watched boys destroy themselves. He watched families fall apart. He watched souls slide down the slope toward hell. And he spent every ounce of his energy trying to stop them. He fed them. He clothed them. He educated them. He loved them. But most of all, he taught them about God. He taught them that God is not a distant judge waiting to punish them. He is a father who loves them. He is a savior who died for them. He is a friend who will never abandon them. And he taught them that the only way to build a life that lasts, a life that brings joy, a life that ends in heaven instead of hell, is to build it with God at the center. This is not old-fashioned. This is not outdated. This is not something that only mattered in the 1800s. This matters now. This matters today. This matters for every couple who is planning a wedding. This matters for every couple who is already married. This matters for every person who is wondering why their life feels so empty even though they have everything they thought they wanted. The road is still there. The lassos are still there. The slope is still there. And hell is still there. Don Bosco did not invent these things. He just saw them more clearly than most people do. He saw the truth that the world tries to hide. He saw that sin is real, that consequences are real, that eternity is real, and that the choices we make in this life determine where we spend the next one. So what do you do if you are a couple who started your life without God? What do you do if you had a civil ceremony and never thought about the sacrament? What do you do if you have been married for years and God has never been part of it? You start now. You do not wait. You do not make excuses. You do not tell yourself it is too late. You go to a priest. You ask about convalidation. You ask about having your marriage blessed by the church. You ask about receiving the sacrament that you missed the first time. And you start praying. You start going to Mass. You start building the foundation you should have built from the beginning. You invite God into your marriage. You ask him to heal what is broken. You ask him to strengthen what is weak. You ask him to give you the grace to love each other the way he loves you. It will not be easy. Don Bosco never promised easy. He promised that with God, it is possible. He promised that with confession, with communion, with devotion to Mary, with prayer, with obedience, with humility, you can escape the lassos. You can climb back up the slope. You can turn around before you reach the gates. Don Bosco called his approach the preventive system. He wrote about it in 1877. The idea was simple. Do not wait for children to fall into sin and then punish them. Prevent them from falling in the first place. Teach them, guide them, love them, show them the right path before they wander onto the wrong one. The preventive system was built on 3 pillars: reason, religion, loving kindness. Reason meant treating young people with respect, explaining why rules exist, appealing to their intelligence, not just saying because I said so, but actually helping them understand the logic behind virtue. Religion meant keeping God at the center of everything, not as a threat, not as a distant judge, but as a loving father who wants what is best for them. Don Bosco made sure his boys went to Mass. He made sure they went to confession. He made sure they prayed the rosary. He made sure they visited the Blessed Sacrament. He did not just tell them to do these things, he did them with them. Loving kindness meant exactly what it sounds like. Love them. Be kind to them, even when they mess up, even when they disappoint you, even when they make the same mistake for the 10th time. Don Bosco famously said, "Run, jump, shout, but do not sin." He let the boys play. He let them have fun. He let them be children. He did not crush their spirits. He directed them. The same approach works in marriage. You cannot force your spouse to change. You cannot threaten them into holiness. You cannot nag them into loving God, but you can love them. You can be kind to them. You can pray for them. You can show them by your example what a life centered on God looks like. And you can be patient. Don Bosco was endlessly patient with his boys. He knew they would fail. He knew they would struggle. He knew they would test him. But he never gave up on them. He always believed they could change. He always hoped they would choose the right path. And many of them did. Not all, but many. The same will be true in your marriage. Your spouse might not change immediately. They might resist. They might argue. They might say they do not need God or the church or the sacraments. But if you love them, if you pray for them, if you show them what grace can do in your own life, eventually they might see it. Eventually they might want it. Eventually they might ask for it. And when they do, you need to be ready. You need to have already found a good priest. You need to have already learned about the process of convalidation. You need to have already started going to Mass yourself, going to confession yourself, praying yourself. Because you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot lead someone to God if you are not walking with God yourself, but you have to choose. You have to choose God. You have to choose the sacrament. You have to choose obedience over your own will. You have to choose the narrow road instead of the wide one. Don Bosco dedicated his life to showing people that choice. He showed them the lassos. He showed them the slope. He showed them the gates, but he also showed them the way out. He showed them confession. He showed them the Eucharist. He showed them Mary. He showed them that no matter how far down the slope they had gone, they could still turn around. They could still be saved. On his deathbed, January 31st, 1888, at dawn, Don Bosco whispered his last words to the Salesians, keeping vigil around him. "Love each other as brothers," he said. "Do good to all and evil to none. Tell my boys that I wait for them all in paradise. Not hell. Paradise." That was always his message. That was always his hope. That was always his mission. To save souls, to show them the truth, to give them a chance to choose heaven instead of hell. And the truth is this: you cannot build a life without God and expect it to stand. You cannot start a new family without the one who created family and expect it to flourish. You cannot make vows without asking for the grace to keep them and expect to succeed. Marriage without God is a house on sand. Marriage without the sacrament is a contract without power. Marriage without prayer is 2 people trying to do the impossible on their own. But marriage with God is different. Marriage with the sacrament is different. Marriage with prayer is different. It is a covenant. It is a partnership. It is 2 people and God standing together against everything the world throws at them. It is grace poured out every day. It is strength when you are weak. It is hope when you are discouraged. It is love when you feel like giving up. The Church understands this. The Church has always understood this. That is why the Catholic Church teaches that marriage between 2 baptized people is not just a nice ceremony. It is a sacrament. One of the 7 sacraments. As important as baptism. As important as the Eucharist. As important as confession. When a couple receives the sacrament of marriage, they become ministers of grace to each other. Their love becomes a sign of Christ's love for the Church. Their union becomes an image of the Trinity. Their faithfulness becomes a witness to the world that real love is possible, that permanent love is possible, that sacrificial love is possible. But when a couple skips the sacrament, they miss all of that. They miss the grace, they miss the protection, they miss the power that comes from having God as the 3rd strand in their rope. And a rope of 2 strands is weak, it frays, it breaks. But a rope of 3 strands is strong, it endures. This is why the Church has strict rules about marriage. This is why Catholics are required to marry in the Church. This is why civil marriages, while legally valid, are not sacramentally valid for Catholics. This is why couples who married outside the Church need to have their marriage convalidated if they want to receive the sacraments. It is not because the Church is mean. It is not because the Church wants to make things difficult. It is because the Church knows what Don Bosco saw in his vision. The church knows that without God, without grace, without the sacrament, couples are walking down that wide road with the smooth stones and the roses. They are walking toward the slope, and they do not even know it. Don Bosco saw families destroyed because the father refused to go to church. He saw children grow up without faith because the mother never taught them to pray. He saw marriages fall apart because the couple never learned to forgive each other the way Christ forgives them. He saw homes filled with anger and resentment and bitterness because there was no grace to heal the wounds. And he saw where it led. He saw the children of those families ending up in his oratory, lost, broken, angry at God because they had never really known God, angry at the church because their parents had mocked the church, angry at priests because their fathers had told them priests were frauds and hypocrites. Don Bosco spent hours and hours with these boys. He listened to their stories. He heard about their families. He understood that many of them never had a chance. Their parents had failed them, their families had failed them, the world had failed them, but Don Bosco refused to fail them. He refused to give up on them. He refused to let them slide down that slope without a fight. He taught them that it was not too late. He taught them that no matter what their parents had done or failed to do, they could still choose God. They could still choose the narrow path. They could still be saved. But they had to want it. They had to choose it. They had to work for it. And the same is true for couples. No matter how your marriage started, no matter what mistakes you made, no matter how far down the wrong path you have gone, it is not too late. You can still turn around. You can still ask for the sacrament. You can still invite God into your home, into your relationship, into your life, but you have to want it. You have to choose it. You have to work for it. You have to be willing to humble yourself. You have to be willing to admit you were wrong. You have to be willing to do things differently. Don Bosco saw both paths. He saw where they lead. He saw the end of the road. And he spent his entire life begging people to choose the right one. The question is, which one will you choose? In 1862, 4 years before his vision of hell, Don Bosco had another dream. He saw the church as a great ship on a stormy sea. Enemy ships surrounded it, firing cannons, trying to sink it. At the helm was the Pope. The ship was battered. The Pope was struck down. But then another Pope took his place, and he steered the ship between two massive columns rising out of the water. On one column was a statue of Mary Help of Christians. On the other was the Eucharist. The ship anchored itself to those two columns, and the storm could not destroy it. This is the answer. This has always been the answer. Mary in the Eucharist, devotion and sacrament, prayer and grace. You do not fight the storm alone. You anchor yourself to the pillars. You ask Mary to intercede. You receive Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. You build your life on the foundation that cannot be shaken. And when the lassos come, and they will come, you cut them with the weapons Don Bosco showed his boys. Frequent confession, frequent communion, devotion to Our Lady, obedience to God, avoiding idleness, avoiding the occasions of sin, keeping your conscience clear, listening to the voice of God instead of the voice of the world. This is how you escape hell. This is how you build a marriage that lasts. This is how you start a new life with God instead of without Him. Don Bosco is still waiting for you in paradise, but he is also still warning you from there. The road is wide, the slope is steep, the lassos are hidden, and the gates are open. Do not wait until you are running toward them to realize you made the wrong choice. Make the right choice now. Invite God into your marriage. Invite God into your family. Invite God into your life. Ask for the sacrament. Ask for the grace. Ask for the strength to obey, even when it is hard. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is where you end up. And the only way to end up in paradise instead of hell is to live your life with God instead of without Him. Don Bosco saw it. He warned about it. He showed the way out. Now the choice is yours.